a return on an investment through a social platform like Facebook, but they wanted to engage with brands that they trust in contexts that they trust, which is a proposition we can offer, and experiment and try to figure it out together. So it's very early days. I would say we've had some successes and we've had some learnings from it, and just this week we released the Open Graph, which is the passive sharing capability. And so we're interested to see how that takes off and what.
And how about younger? Are you seeing younger readers as you look at demographics there?
Yes, younger and more female.
That's an interesting phenomenon we've seen with several media companies with Facebook.
Yeah.
Chris, what about those gaffer relationships? And there are a lot of relationships in the newspaper industry. How do you assess those relationships so that you feel like you're getting as much as you're given?
You know, so a lot of it for us comes back to looking at the different audiences that we're trying to serve. So some people are looking for the opinions of the editors and the curation that makes up the stories that are going to be presented sort of front and center. For people who are using other tools, some of the, whether it's Facebook, where importance is defined by to some extent what my friends are looking at. So I want that as my sort of editing and filter applied, or whether it's Google with search. There are different people who are accessing the content for different information and or for different reasons. And so when we look at it, we think about what audience is trying to use the information, and how do we make sure that the relationship is at the end of the day fair to us. And it goes back to controlling or getting access to as much information as possible. And where we start to look at making trade-offs on that is because we get something else that's of value. So Apple's a good example.
Yep.
You know, selling through the Apple Store gives you tremendous reach and a huge amount of visibility, but it makes it more difficult for us to get back to the subscriber information. And so the initial foray for us was to stay away from that environment because of the solution we had, number one, but more importantly because our target audience is something that's geographically bounded, at least the initial audience for that product.
And you have very high name recognition there and ability to get to them.
Right, but as we look at, for instance, the traffic to Boston.com, more than half of the traffic that comes each month comes from outside of New England.
That's right.
So as we look for solutions, you see us with dedicated device solutions in the Apple Store and other in the Android Store for Boston.com, because we want that reach and we want that ability to extend.
Good. Let me ask if there are any questions out there at the moment. And while you're thinking about it, I want to ask Elisa about WSJ Video.
Sure.
And that project. That really took me by surprise when I looked at it. And the funny thing was, there was very little text on it. And you think about the Wall Street Journal, you think text. How is that doing, and how are you building on that at this point? Okay,
thanks. Well, we're incredibly excited about WSJ Live, and it goes back to what I began to describe as our core strategy. It's to have the Wall Street Journal everywhere, and to think about the Wall Street Journal as a franchise, as a brand that means quality journalism with a specific focus on business and finance, and not to be limited by the medium. And so in a digital sense, that's a particularly enormous opportunity. In digital, you're not limited by printing presses, by the logistics of distributing newspapers, and all those other heavy burdens that a business case for anything in print has.
Right.
And so we look at digital and say we want to be everywhere our audience is, and there isn't a faster growing platform, I guess, than online video. Not only through internet-connected TVs and over-the-top boxes and Xboxes and things like that, but also just through the web and mobile. You mentioned in your setup, Ken, not only is the infrastructure changing significantly, but the device capabilities make it now a pleasurable thing to do when it wasn't before, and that's watch video online. So we're responding, I guess, in part to a need to continually work to keep a share of people's time and work and earn more minutes in their day, because that's ultimately our goal, with also a focus on what kind of devices are they doing it over. And if they happen to be sitting in front of their Netflix box or their Hulu subscription, we want to be there so that as they sit down in that kind of environment, they're able to access the Wall Street Journal. And it doesn't make sense to do that in print, frankly. So we're thinking more about a consumer who sits down to do something on a particular device. What's the user experience that makes sense in that context? And so for internet-connected TVs or Hulu or YouTube or what have you, it's video. And so the idea is not that we're trying to create a new broadcast channel, or that we're trying to get people to switch from reading in text to using video, but that we're able to offer choice, and that we're able to make the brand even more ubiquitous than it is today.
And this from a paper that didn't have photographs 10 years ago, right? Dan? Project.
That's okay, I'll project. I was going to ask, you talk about capturing data about users and such, particularly for your subscription users, and particularly now as from a national, you start to move into what you were just talking about with all of the digital type of broadcast. Are you capturing information down to the article that's being consumed and associating that with that reader? I know that there are publishers that are doing that and very much using that for marketing. On a regional level, Chris and Alyssa, on a national, are you doing that?
Do you want to go?
Sure. We are doing it to some extent. We're sort of experimenting around the idea of an inference engine, so that you could say, we noticed you are interested in the following, and you may be interested in this as well. So as we develop those capabilities, to some extent it's a technical limitation that we have, that we can't do it across the board yet. So we're doing it in pockets to see to what degree is this going to be something that's really helpful to the business model, and not potentially backfire on people feeling like if I go to consume information in this environment, they're really tracking every single thing that I do, which can be off-putting to some people as well. So we're sort of experimenting in a way right now with that before we would make a significant investment to build out the capability.
And from our perspective, there are some limitations around the technology platform. So if any of you have tried to log into any service using your IPTV or any kind of internet-connected TV that has a remote control associated with it, it's not a fun experience. So in those kind of environments, we don't do it because the technology isn't there yet. Online, as Chris said, we do in aggregates and in anonymized ways. We don't target individuals, and we don't look at data on individual level, but we use the technology to put people into cohorts and to have lookalike segments that allow us to serve to a particular group of people a particular content set that might be relevant to them. So it varies within the limits of our privacy policy about what we can do and what we don't do.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, we have the same issues around privacy and information, and it kind of goes back to the technology will continue to advance, and the power of the machines will allow a lot of things, allow us to be capable of doing a lot more things, not just us, but